Hi Prem, we are live. We can start.
Hello and welcome to this very interesting session, a panel discussion, which is the first of a series of panel discussion that the Digital Journalists Association of India, DiJAI, has planned. This is the launch discussion, if you may say. And the discussion is about journalism and entrepreneurship in the digital era. So before we go any forward, the Digital Journalists Association of India was founded by by Mr. Prime Point K. Srinivasan, and we have him with us to give the opening remarks, which will set the course for this discussion. We have lined up an awesome set of panelists who are most relevant to this discussion of entrepreneurship and journalism coming together in the digital era. So before we head to the introductions about our panelists, let me hand it over to Mr. Srinivasan for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Prem. Good evening, viewers. Let me start with advanced greetings to our 75th anniversary of our great Independence Day. Let us all enjoy the Independence Day next week. The Digital Journalists Association of India was started in 2016 by a group of digital journalists, and with support of IIT Madras, where we launched this organization, just to create an awareness among the digital journalists. Or the digital journalism is not yet defined by any law or anywhere in the world. But today, the media is undergoing a churning because of the digital technology. The print media and television media, everybody is using a digital. The whole world of communication is already undergone a tremendous change. A lot of retrenchments have happened. A lot of worries have happened among the journalists themselves. We thought from the DiJAI, how can we make use of the digital journalism to become an entrepreneur instead of being employed as an employee? How can I become an employer? How can I give an employment to others? Every time when there is a technological changes in the history, it is always a challenging. It is always very painful also. Now we are in the transition in the media from the print technology and the television technology. All are there remaining, but still digital technology is running super fast. Even the 5G is going to come in another few more months, which will be again triggering the growth of digital technology. And it is not only the triggering, it is going to give an ample opportunity for many people to create employment. It's a new openings, a new avenues. Today, we are going to have a very, very interesting discussion with the eminent panelists. All the panelists who are lined up here are experts in their own field, and those who have got a very good experience in their line as an entrepreneur. So let us hear from them. I am very grateful to our honorary secretaries, Prem, Deepthi, and Vinoth for taking all the pains in organizing this event. Please enjoy this. Now over to Deepthi, honorary secretary, to take it forward. Thank you. We'll meet again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Srinivasan, and good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. And if you're watching this over after the live stream, so we thank you that you've joined our live stream today. So it's an interesting panel that we have, and when, as Mr. Srinivasan said, we were put forward with this request to do this program, the three of us, Prem, Vinoth, and myself, sat down and we had this discussion about what should the subject be, and we couldn't agree more at the fact that we are in a climate here in India where entrepreneurship is really being nurtured and growing. And so we said, let's take the two loves of our lives, which is media and journalism, and put those together and talk about entrepreneurship. So the next step was that we wanted to identify who our speakers were going to be for this panel discussion. And so it gives me immense pleasure to introduce two of the speakers, and then I will have Prem introduce our other two speakers. First up today, we have Pratiba Raman. Pratiba happens to be a former colleague of mine and a longtime friend, but she is a career-long journalist in broadcast journalism with over 13 years in newsrooms across the country. We shared time as colleagues when we were working for NDTV Hindu here in Chennai, and then she moved over to do bigger things in Bangalore. And she's covered politics, natural disasters, as well as crime. She led the efforts for digital journalism and brand identity for AsiaNet's Newsable before taking on her own dreams to be an independent journalist, kickstarting her foray into digital journalism and entrepreneurship in that sense. She built out News Sense, which is a news topic and content that is delivered using social media. And while that has been a slow start for Pratibha, she's got a lot going on. She's currently contracting a project with Amazon Prime and India Today on an investigative crime series. And just as a side note, Pratibha is a massive, massive movie fan and a huge loyalist to films. So welcome, Pratibha, and thank you for taking the time to join us this afternoon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Totally.
Second on our panel is Vinoth Poovalingam. Vinoth is the founder of Wire. He was instrumental in the launch of eCart Logistics and Flipkart and Amazon India Logistics. At Wire, Vinoth and his team are building a tech room for global newsrooms, basically, helping them integrate their journalistic practices with the digital needs of a newsroom, processing engineering, as well as giving them tech support to enable them to position themselves in the market for success. Vinod loves a good challenge and is a fan of all things tech. Welcome, Vinod.
Hi guys. Thanks, Deepthi.
Thanks, Vinod. And Vinod is also co-secretary of DiJAI. And with that, I turn it over to Prem, who's also co-secretary for DiJAI. Over to you, Prem.
Thanks, Deepthi. Thanks for that wonderful introduction of Pratibha and Vinoth. I'm very happy to introduce the rest of the panelists, Arun and Ram, both of whom I have worked with in the past. Arun is probably one of the most seasoned journalists in the country who is now turned an academician. I don't want to miss out on any of Arun's achievements, so let me read out what I have got about Arun here. After over 40 years as a journalist, mostly with print, and also about 7 years in that with television, and that too in the early days of private television news channels. Arun is now teaching as a full-time professor at the Asian College of Journalism. He has co-authored the fully integrated journalism curriculum with ACJ, which ACJ has been offering its students in the last 2 years with the aim of producing a pool of well-trained, multi-format, multi-platform journalists who will be capable of delivering news across text, video, audio, and digital platforms. ACJ is now nurturing a set of young and aspiring media entrepreneurs. This is where Arun becomes most relevant to this discussion. And with that aim, last year, Arun has assisted in launching a module on entrepreneurial journalism in ACJ's curriculum. Ram, I'm so happy to introduce Ram in this discussion. Ram and I have been colleagues in the past. I've worked very closely with Ram, and Ramanathan has been leading the operations at NewsMinute currently. His responsibilities include scouting and onboarding new clients for the NewsMinute's branded content offerings and events, executing ad campaigns at the in-house studio Brand Cafe, supervising programmatic revenue streams, and overseeing special editorial and non-editorial projects. Ram is also responsible for strategizing for the future by setting up content pipelines, revenue streams, and which is again one reason why Ram becomes extremely relevant to this conversation that we're going to have. In his previous role at the NewsMinute, Ram was a senior editor with responsibilities in reporting and everyday news desk operations. Ram started out as a television reporter and has worked as a field reporter and at news desks across India's best television channels, which has provided him with deep insight into not just the media industry, but also on issues that he has reported on. He has extensively reported from various parts of South India and in New Delhi. the News Minute has given him fresh insights on the functioning of online media. His work experience also includes working for nonprofit communications and policy. So we are really happy to all the four panelists who have extensive experience and, like Srinivasan sir was saying, probably the most relevant set of speakers we could have had put together for this discussion on journalism and entrepreneurship. So before we start the discussion, some quick pointers for the audience. We are live on Facebook and YouTube channels of Digital Journalists Association of India, or DiJAI. Please post your questions on the respective platforms, and we'll try to address as many questions as possible towards the end of the session when we have our Q&A session. Over to you, Deepthi.
Thanks, Prem. So I think it's important as we get into today's discussion is to really just set the scene, right? In today's India, the current government has put in place the Startup India initiative, which is aiding business-minded Indians to build their dream companies. There are over 60,000 startups operating in India at this point. There are several schemes by the Indian government to basically help businesses grow, such as the Multiplier Grant scheme, the New Generation Innovation and Entrepreneurship Development Center for R&D. And these are just a few that are there in the Indian government's, if you may call it, bag for entrepreneurs to really take advantage of. That's one side of it, right? The other side is where India was ranked 150th on the Press Freedom Index among 180 nations. Journalists here in India are at risk to encounter political interference by exercising their role in this fourth estate. Trust in the media is at an all-time low. News delivery persons and platforms have become the news. The average age of a digital news subscriber stands at 50. So despite all of these realities, right, the entrepreneurial spirit in the news media space soars with the prospect of digital entrepreneurship. And so with that sort of as our scene setter for this evening, my question to the group is really this. What is the differentiator of a digital newsroom and a traditional one? And the question is open to all four of you all as panelists. So anybody would like to take a stab at that question?
Okay, my scene.
Yes, Pratiba, go ahead.
Okay, I guess I started off as a print reporter and then jumped to the television platform and then finally landed in the digital platform. As to answer your question, what is really the differentiator? Well, I think it is timeliness, because with respect to a digital organization, everything is time bound. I mean, I'm not denying the fact that television isn't, but then the fact that, you depend on news gathering departments, and as soon as the news breaks, you don't even wait for a reporter get to the field and find out what really is happening on ground. You kind of gather all that information right where you're sitting at home and then deliver that news on the platform. That's number one. And with a digital organization, resources are extremely small. So we have just around 5 or 6 of them who gather all of the news and deliver them on the platform, publishing them on the site. The network is large when it comes to a television organization, right? You have all the reporters in different parts of the nation covering the news. So that is the second differentiator. And the third would be the dependence on news gathering departments is fairly larger when it comes to a digital organization. For instance, with respect to my digital platform, I would depend more on the ANIs and the other news agencies of India to find out what is really happening around the world, rather than depend on my set of reporters who are on field. And yeah, that about sums up, because digital is the way to go, because more often than not, you'll find a person on a mobile phone rather than sitting on the television. So I guess that is what differentiates it, because the attention span is too very limited. Brevity is the key, and there are platforms dime a dozen. And what sets these youngsters apart would be the fact that they would be glued onto their mobile phones, and so that's digital is the way to go.
I agree with you, Pratibha, that a lot of content today is consumed on the phones and on our mobile devices as we continue to grow technology as well. I mean, Srinivasan sir was saying that 5G is just right around the corner in terms of adoption. Ram, I'm actually interested to hear from you with, work with the News Minute. How have you seen that sort of transformation given your own journey through journalism and through newsrooms over the years past?
Well, yeah, I mean, I couldn't have put it better than Pratibha in terms of what are the points you mentioned. But other than that, I think it's multimedia, multi-channel, and multimedia, multi-channel, and multi-platform. In the sense that I think when you're working in a print newsroom or a TV newsroom, you have one screen to cater to. You have one broadsheet to cater to. In a newsroom, in a digital newsroom, when you're working, it's not just about publishing an article or putting out video on one platform, right? You have to figure out when you've gathered the news, in what form does it have to go in the various platforms that you exist in, and every platform has a different kind of format. So you have to be ready to roll out the news that you have gathered, the journalism that you have cobbled together in the print format, in the video format, in terms of social media shots. So I think having a multimedia, multi-screen and multi format approach to journalism to me is one of the biggest differentiators between what we used to do in a TV or a print newsroom and what we do here in a digital newsroom.
Yeah, I mean, Arun, I think Ram and Pratibha have put it nicely in terms of what's happening now, and they couldn't put it any better. But I'd like to ask Arun. Arun, you've seen the bygone eras, so to say. You've been here, you've been seeing this happening for so many years, and now this transformation. What do you think are the key aspects that have completely changed? Both Ram and Pratibha have very clearly said, what is happening right now. But in this transformation, what have you noticed? If you could just give us some insights.
Sorry, I had my muted. Okay. Thank you, Prem. In some ways, I do agree with what Ram and Pratibha said. And like you mentioned, so I started at a time in journalism at a time when we were using the hot metal technology. From hot metal technology to the photo offset to then the computerization, everything. I've seen everything. Now, TV also, television also I've seen. Now, what I have seen is that as far as the print was concerned, we were personnel heavy in the sense that we depended a lot on the number of editorial persons that you had. Editorial teams used to be large, and you necessarily had to have a large editorial team, and then you had and if you're not totally dependent on going to be totally dependent, you couldn't afford to be totally dependent only on news agencies. So you needed to have your reporters, a team of reporters, which is about at least in a city like Chennai, you used to have about 15 reporters you needed. So that was the kind of situation. Now when television came in, so television thing that changed it a bit. Changed a bit in the sense that you could operate with a smaller team in the same Chennai. If you remember at those times, we in TVI had only 3 reporters. NDTV had 3 reporters. Even ANI had only 2 reporters. Okay, the thing. So that was the kind of situation. But television was more capital intensive than the print was. But now here we come to the digital one, where I think what really changed the momentum for digital was the last 2 years of COVID, when we had the lockdown, when people were not, whatever be the reason, the newspapers were not, the print media organization were not able to deliver their newspapers to the doorstep at one point of time. So that changed quite a lot of things, and more set of people started going digital. But even before that, the younger generation had already gone on the digital platform. They were going for the news on the digital platform. But then, in terms of an organization like both Deepti was pointed, you need a small team. You just need a small team to do carry out the thing. Let's take for instance all the news. Faye D'Souza. Faye D'Souza has got a very, very small team. I think bulk of the work is being done by her herself. Okay, as far as the journalistic journalistics are another thing. So what you need is the backup, or the backroom boys or the tech guys uh, to run the show. That's the thing. So in terms of if you really look at it, in terms of investment, if you need to invest in the thing, the investment seems to be a little far less that is necessary if you want to start things. That's why more and more people are now looking at the digital media as startups. Yeah.
Thanks, Arun. You know, just moving to the sort of next level of the discussion in terms of the pace that has been set. What do you think should be? I mean, any of you can take this question. Vinoth will come to probably the technical aspects as far as this question is concerned when Ram, Pratiba, and Arun have answered that. The point is, what are the focus areas while building this? I mean, you very nicely put how this transformation has been happening. What are what is the kind of visible transition that's happening? But in terms of focus areas while building a newsroom, whether it is not only as an entrepreneur but also as a journalist, what is the focus area while building a newsroom? Ram, you have done it. Pratibha, you are in the process. So if you guys can give us that insight, and also Arun, you can weigh in on what you are teaching the future entrepreneurs. So Ram, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should definitely start with audience. Anybody who starts a venture to do with news or publishing today, what digital media has made it happen is that shown how fragmented the market really is, and also how the fragmentation in the market can be leveraged, to kind of decentralize publishing. So I think, and now that is a reality. Now I think it is very impossible for news publishers to exist unless they're really big or legacy or first mover advantage kind of digitally native publishers to be people who do everything, right? So where is the gap in the market where you can fill the gap, and what kind of audience are you going to cater to, right? So I think starting point is that. After that, of course, there are many different things, but I think having some kind of a tech capability, tech understanding is becoming very, very important. And I think that's something a lot of journalists learn the hard way, because we're not very easy, we're not very willing to learn new things beyond a point. So I think tech is an important aspect of it. And as a journalist, if you're becoming an entrepreneur, I think one other very important focus should be to understand the kind of revenue model you want to follow. I think you need to be very, very clear about what kind of revenue model you want to pursue right from the beginning. It can change later, but initially itself, I think you need to have a clear idea, and that can really help you in the long run.
So Ram, I actually want to linger on that point little bit more. When you talk about audience, I do understand that language a lot. We also use that in our stream of work as well. I think what's the biggest demarcating factor, rather demarcator between when it was a traditional newsroom versus when it is now a digital newsroom, is that in a traditional newsroom we didn't really have to worry so much about the audience. We had larger teams to work with, like we've already stated. But in a digital newsroom, the fear factor can be, who is that right audience? And it's really hard to engage audiences when there are competing organizations doing almost the same, sometimes even literally the exact replica of what you're doing. So how do you find the right audience?
See, there are two answers to it, right? There are two parts to it. One is how do you create content which will organically flow to the kind of audience that you want. So a good part of how you need to be able to reach out to your audience comes in creating the content itself, the kind of journalism that you want to do. The other part is data and tech driven processes that you put into place. Obviously, now there are different kinds of technologies out there. Just beyond the social media platforms that we are used to, there's a ton of data out there, a ton of companies out there which are giving different kinds of solutions towards that. It's becoming more and more important to understand what kind of tech solutions you need to use, which are right for you, and for you to be able to reach out to that audience. But the first step is that, despite the kind of duopoly that the market exists in, the digital market exists in, which is your Google and Facebook having so much agency in the entire news market, I think that to a large extent, good organic content does find its way to the audience that is intended to, if it is done the right way. So I think the first step is that of making sure that the audience, the content is reaching your audience, is actually to create the content which will organically flow to that audience. For instance, if I'm creating a Chennai hyper local website here, I really need to understand what the people in Chennai really want. Right? Google's search algorithm, or to some extent perhaps even the social media algorithms, are tuned towards that. So I think content is the first step, and then there is a ton of technology out there which you can use. And then beyond that, there are a lot of ATL things as well. I think we are living in a world where even despite being digital and depending on tech, I think real world connections, real world partnerships, and things like that can also be very useful.
Yeah. So on the same note, Pratibha, do you want to just take a go at what kind of audiences that we need to look at?
Well, Prem, I think Ram has covered most of it. He kind of plucked the entire answer from me. But yes, there was one thing that Ram did mention, which was an idea. So I can perhaps throw more light on that. The idea that struck me, which triggered the entire resolve to start New Sense, was the fact that there was this niece of mine who came home. She had an internship to attend here, and while she was totally into fashion and that kind of an area, and I was completely into news. And there was one day when she just sat down next to me and she said, I have to write something. This is a college project and I need to know who is the chief minister of Tamil Nadu. And I was shell shocked. And I said, it's time you knew all of this, right? And then she said, I don't know how you are a news reporter. I find news very boring. And that kind of triggered the dominant resolve in me to start New Sense. And I thought, okay, I must create a platform to find the right content in terms of news to reach this kind of an audience, which is my niece, who's just about, say, 15 to 25 years of age. And the more I kind of delved on it, I realized that my niece is all the time hooked on to Instagram. And I have zero knowledge about Instagram. So I had content, which is news. I had the audience, which is 25-year-old. And I had the platform, which is Instagram. So the three kind of merged, and that kind of my idea was already there, and that's how I started New Sense. So I think Ram covered the background of it, and I'm here giving you the story at the foreground.
Yeah, nicely done, Pratibha. Thanks. And
adding to that, I'll just like to add. Prem, I would like to just add to that. See, one of the things that when we started thinking in terms of launching this module on entrepreneurial journalism. In fact, we had tried it a bit on a very small scale, only for when we had the differentiation between new media, print and television. Just for the new media students, we had a small kind of module, which of course we were groping in the dark at that time. Okay, so we tried it out, but then even at that point, one of the things that we could realize was simple. There are three questions that came up. One is, what is who's going to be a target audience, and what is going to be your content? Now, how do you decide? Well, do you decide on your audience first, and then the content, or the content and the audience? That was the one thing. Okay, there was one part of it. So then the other part, like, as we moved on, when we started seriously thinking about it in the last couple of years, we started thinking about it, and finally did launch the thing. One of the things that our resource persons that we were having from across the country, as well as from many of the universities abroad, like we had Jeremy Kaplan from City University of New York. So he had already given a few lectures on entrepreneurial journalism for our students. So we we included him also on our panel of resources for that. And the one thing that emerged during that time was that it's identification of all three have to be done simultaneously. One, you have to look at what is the existing ecology. Where is the gap? Do you see the gap? If you see the gap, is there an audience for that gap? And if you have an audience for that gap, what is the kind of content that you would like to deliver to that audience? So all these things we needed to do as a simultaneous. And like all of you pointed out, all of the audience is growing younger by the day. Unlike newspapers where you are getting the audience is growing older, here you are getting the audience is growing younger by the day, and you are getting more and more platforms on which you can deliver news. That is one thing. And also discovered that a couple of our students were already trying to work out something. They were trying to work out on newsletters. They were trying to work out on a small short news and short explainers on Instagram. No, it was their own effort. Then we pulled in all these things, and now what the kind of thing that we have, our curriculum itself has been totally changed. Now it's like Ram said, you need to deliver news on multi-platform and multi-format. That's exactly what we're doing. We are totally done away with the artificial brick wall that we used to have between the print, the television and the digital. Now everything has become one huge thing. So everyone has to be trained. That's what will happen. That slowly things also but let me come back to that point of the COVID. Things would have things would have taken some more time in India to move towards digital, but COVID has ensured that the process has been hastened now.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Arun, that it's really important that we take into consideration the gap that exists, right? So while you have that consideration of the gap, you also look at the audiences, and it's important to understand the metrics. I think the missing element here in our conversation thus far has been, how do you understand the metrics when you're trying to start up and also when you're building content? And Vinod, I want to bring you into this conversation on the metrics element. What is one of the most important metrics when you're talking about audience and you're talking about supplying that content information to them?
Yeah, Deepthi. I think the most important metric every newsroom should go behind is engagement, right? Uh, See, there is a misnomer across lot of. I work with around 100 odd publishers in the country, right? Everyone talks about page view as the main thing, right? They talk about number of people coming there, how many people I have, like, so mostly you'll start seeing posts by many media companies saying that I have got 200 million page hits, that many views, this many things. That's a glory number which people go for. But I think what people should be going for is the engagement metric. How it can be, you need not, every newsroom need not be a big behemoth, right? You can actually be a player who's talking to a niche audience. Just ensure that your audience network, the focus of your content, is being covered, right? And for that, what is the kind of engagement you have, and that should be measured across channels, right? As Ram mentioned, it's not that we'll have to look at just a website anymore, right? It's not the print days where you just have the print paper or a TV. Your circulation number is the only thing which is going to define who you are, right? It's going to be across channels. How good is your strength in Instagram? How good is your strength in YouTube, right? So it's a mix of multiple things, and the content which you put goes to multiple through different channels. In fact, I was just reading an article a couple of days back where in the US, probably more than search, people have started using TikTok to see basic things, basic search is happening in TikTok, right? So that is the way world is changing. Different platforms are coming, and you need to have your presence across multiple things. And the most important thing which you'll have to go behind in all these platforms is engagement. How engaging is your content, and how many people you are able to touch point and engage in a meaningful way. Back to you, Deepthi.
I'm actually interested to hear from Pratiba and Ram as well, when you talk about looking at metrics and engagement, again, a lot of different platforms have different metrics that they follow. How important is engagement to you all in the work that you all are doing?
Well, is
Shall I
Ram
go ahead?
going first?
Or you want to go ahead?
Yeah, Ram, go ahead.
Okay. So no, I cannot second what Vinoth has said enough. I think thankfully we are collectively as a sector we're moving away from the page view driven madness that we used to live in, and it's very very important. I think more and more going forward from here. To understand what kind of engagement we have. See, reach is important. If you are going to reach out to millions and millions of people, tens of millions of people, like the News Minute does, I think that is a very important starting point. But we are in a stage where it's not enough if I just lay my eyes on your content for one fleeting second and that gets recorded as a page view, and it's not important, right? How much time am I spending on a particular platform? What is the kind of completion rate that I have on my YouTube video? What is the kind of time spent I have on my page, on my article? And there was a time where likes were kind of derided, but now I'm starting to think that likes are slightly better than page views, because at least somebody's taking the effort to actually like a post that you're doing. Although likes can be bought and all that, that's a different kind of story. But some kind of interaction from the readers, from our audience, I think is becoming far more important, the kind of reach that we have. And I think people in the advertising side of things are also fast changing their understanding about these things. So we are still, personally speaking about the News Minute, we do kind of look at our engagement metrics. We do look at our page views and everything. But frankly, I think the biggest metric for any entrepreneur should be revenue. So, is how much of that engagement is turning into the actual money which is coming in through your payment gateway, or any other kind of, business model that you have. I think that's the biggest metric right now. So we are kind of focusing on revenue a lot more. But yes, in terms of engagement metrics, if it's video, completion rates are very important. If it is about a post on social media, likes and I think comments and shares are important. And if it is about articles beyond page views, the time spent on the page is important. I think these are the kind of metrics that we need to start paying a lot more attention to.
Well, actually,
Yeah,
taking
and
on from
Pratibha, yeah.
what,
Sorry. Oh.
yeah, taking on from what Ram had mentioned, in fact, yes, we do focus a lot on engagement and the page views and things like that. But then ultimately, what really is needed for an entrepreneur is revenue. So, I think everything boils down to, everybody pays at least for a subscription on Netflix to watch the right kind of movies. Everybody pays at Mintra to buy the right kind of clothes, but nobody pays for the right kind of news that they want. So I think the moment you have the kind of effort that you take and the kind of time that you spend in delivering the right content for the right kind of audience, I think it's time the audience also pays back, right? So they need to kind of get onto your platform, engage on your platform, hit the like button and also prove to the content creator that here is the money that I give you for delivering this kind of news. So that kind of gap still needs to be filled as far as India is concerned. And the other point is that in terms of revenue, we also with respect to social media platforms, at least the startup that I head here, we look at creating content for different kinds of clients as well. So we need to kind of differentiate between an advertorial and the kind of content that we deliver to the audience. So those are the kind of differentiators we need to keep in mind in terms of revenue as well as engagement.
Arun, thanks, Pratibha. Arun, would you like to
Yeah.
add in terms of what goes
yeah.
into the academics when it comes to taking
Oh.
metrics?
So see, one thing that I agree with both Ram and to some extent with Pratibha also. The thing is, it's no longer the question of how many clicks are you are having or how many likes are you having, how many views you are having. It's more the time you spend on the page. That's becoming more and more important. And also the kind of engagement that you have with your audience. So And at the same time, it's you're talking about one of the biggest problems that we faced last time also when we were working with the kid, with the students and their projects, was the revenue model. How are you going to how are you going to uh, get the revenue? There was something while there was one point where the students did have a lot of trouble in sorting out. So the thing is, I think probably like Pratiba made a passing mention of it about you pay for your dress but not for your news. Okay, right? Yeah, something to that effect. Okay. So I think to that effect, I think you had to blame the print media, and as far as India is concerned, we have to you have to blame the Bennett Coleman and company for it, where you made a news almost free. I still get still my annual subscription for Times of India is only 699 rupees, which is absolutely silly. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing that we're having. That you have got entire two three generations of news consumer who think that they don't have to pay, or they have to just shell out the bare minimum, not even what you pay for a cup of tea. So that is one thing. That being the case, here the question of how do you get your readership and also get the revenue. This is one thing. This is where I think uh, the uh, the discussion on the revenue model itself that's going on now. People are worried about what kind of model is going to really work out. I think that might be a deciding factor right now. What I feel is we are in the 1990s. Uh, I would say a situation close to the 1990s when we had the dot-com boom. We had the dot-com boom in the mid 90s, right? And then what happened? All of the uh, like uh, uh, like uh, like many of the people used to say, it's no longer dot-com, it's a dot-con. So just the startups or the companies were collapsing left, right, and center, and only the one with the strongest revenue model, the only with the strongest work ethics, they survived. Those are just, I think the similar thing might happen. We may see a proliferation of the new startups in the next 4 5 years, but then we may still be looking at a situation where is of late 90s when the dot-com boom goes bust. Yep.
Yeah, Arun. Yeah, and in a way, it's I mean, it's crystal clear what that like Arun, Ram mentioned. At the end of the day, the only metrics that matters is the revenues. But before we start discussing that metrics, there is also the cost that goes into producing, in the cost that goes into the cost into investments in content, investments in tech. So I mean, just to get a sense of, I mean, yes, revenues do matter. Obviously, the cost investment is going into eventually getting a certain revenue or meeting a certain revenue target. But what should be the priority in terms of the money that's being invested, priority areas for a news organization? Uh, I mean, this question is open to all again. Pratibha, do you want to take it? Which has been your focus area? What should be ideally, and then we'll go to others to get a sense of what their prioritizing has been: content, tech, sourcing content, and all those things.
Well, in fact, content and tech, I think, would be the main focus areas in terms of where you really have to concentrate with respect to the cost. Because one, you need to find the right content that you need to provide to the audience. Because if you have to get revenue, most of the clients would also try and come to you to asking you what are your page views or what are the kind of likes that you get, and it's only dependent on that. So based on your content, you get your viewers. Based on that, you get your revenue. So you have to focus on content, number one, and also the tech, because you need to identify the platform and try and deliver news in the most authentic fashion as possible, so that you catch that audience at the right time on the right platform to get the right revenue.
Ram, is that as simple as Pratibha is putting it across?
Well, in certain ways, it is simple. Obviously, when you grow as an organization, when you have more and more people, when you have bigger spends, then things get a little bit more complicated. I would just like to, although, make a side point here, which is that I think any entrepreneur starting any organization right now, especially if you're a journalist and come essentially from a news point of view, staying lean is an extremely important thing. And this is something which, I would credit my CEO, Vignesh, for having taught all of us here at the News Minute. Staying lean is extremely, extremely important. And especially because the digital medium allows for it, right? Getting, printing newspaper is not easy. You need lots of money for that. Having a TV channel is not easy. You need to spend crores and crores of money to stay it up. But digital low barrier cost is defines the medium. So when it is something which is a great strength for the medium, you have to play on that strength. And I think so you must focus on starting with. And see, another problem we in the world that we live in today is that we see these Series A, Series B, Series C investments of millions and millions of dollars. So everybody who's a startup, their eyes pop saying, you know what, I want a $10 million investment next. So let me show growth hackers, hacking growth and trying to show billions of page views and somehow getting $10 million. There are people who are doing it. If they are able to make tons of money by doing it, great, good for them. I'm not kind of going after that kind of an approach towards business. But if you want to build a good journal, a good content business tradition, which is foundationally strong, especially which is strong on journalism, then you need to start slow, start small, try and have small victories, balance your burn and revenue in a somewhat of a sensible manner, and then move to trying to find out how you can achieve scale. So your spending has to be focused on your four core business first. For instance, if it's a tech product, then tech is what you need to be focused on, not marketing, right? So if it's journalism is your core thing, then you need to start with I would think that you need to start with a one person kind of a model where, okay, how much of content can I produce first, and how much of money can I make with that first, and then how can I grow the team from that. So understanding this, that staying lean and having a very healthy burn versus revenue ratio as you move along, I think is a very important, is a very important part of being an entrepreneur today.
Excellent.
I'd like to add a couple of more points to what Ram just said, right? So we have been interacting with a lot of these folks, right? And typically when you start talking about revenue, everyone gravitates towards programmatic revenue in a big way, because that is something which is as in it's a democratic medium. So everyone thinks that, yes, let's get in, I'll get all the million page views and then start making millions in terms of programmatic. At least that is the kind of thing which people are telling out there in the platform, right? So, but as we said initially also, it's all about engagement and then trying to build that community around what you're trying to do, right? So how you can monetize that, it need not be just the programmatic revenue, right? It should be subscription led. And how do you get that subscription revenue trickling in, right? You'll have to start studying your audience. What is it the audience are looking for, how much they are willing to pay for that, right? Trying to do some kind of
retain the subscription revenue also.
Exactly. And which platform if you are actually having a platform where most of your audience is essentially getting from Facebook only, right? Then probably it is not something you are so good at. You are just created a big Facebook audience and Facebook is distributing your content across, right? You are not going to start getting too much of subscription revenue from there, right? On the other hand, it is search led to the way where you are this thing, where you can actually do a lot of search terms. You can do a simple analysis, go into Google and search yourself a couple of things and see which are the newspapers which are coming first, right? And is this something which you are talking about, are you getting ranked there? That means, are people organically finding you? Those are the things which we need to question first, right? As an entrepreneur, you should start looking at whether the focus of my content is what is there a I think Arun also actually put it very succinctly. Is there a gap in the market there? Is it overcrowded? Those are the questions we need to ask, and then start building in terms of which are the channels of revenue. Subscription is something everyone is talking about right now, but are we good for subscription? I personally have been tech partners for certain people who subscription didn't work. They are talking very generic content and they are assuming subscription will work. It won't, right? You need to actually go to that niche. Where is your niche? Identify your strengths. Those are the things which we need to look at. And after all this comes costs, right? So if you are going to do subscription, there is an infrastructure cost to be paid for what subscription services you are using, right? Making the initial entry into this. See, again, the internet is a democratic medium, right? To start something, you don't need thing. You can start a Substack You can create your followership on Substack. You can start your own YouTube channel. None of this thing need any big tech investment per se, right? Your laptop is good enough to start all these things. Once you're validated, when you need tech is when you want to scale, right? That is when it starts taking you start taking decisions into whether I have to go open source, I need to go on an existing infrastructure, or do I build something in-house. So there are multiple decision points. So for as an entrepreneur, you're typically in the 0 to 1 phase, right? At that time, there are a lot of things which are at your disposal. You can do it without any big tech investment per se. But once you have identified that this is the point which I'm going to focus on, this is where my audience is going to come, that is when you start taking the serious questions on cost. How do I build for the scale? How do I build tech for that? That's my point, Prem. Over to you.
Vinod, I
Just
actually
adding.
like your point. Sorry, Arun. Go
Can I
ahead.
add a bit of it? The
Yes.
one thing that we also noticed during our discussions with the students was that the question of identification. Identification. How do you whether you, the kind of content that you're going to deliver. So whether you need to be a small fish in a medium-sized pond or a big pond, or just are going to be a small fish in a big pond. That's where the question on comes. And finally, we encourage the students to look for content which may be so if it may even be an absolutely niche product. It doesn't matter. Let's have a look at it, because there will be audience for that. For instance, about 10 years ago, a friend of mine, he decided, okay, he used to be writing on logistics, and he said, okay, why not, instead of writing for someone for on logistics, he started on logistics uh, site. He went digital and started a larger logistics website, which is doing fairly well now. It's not making big money, but yes, he's happy enough with the way he has gone. So even if you have a niche area, that's more and more the I feel that the digital content has to be more and more targeted, and more targeted at a smaller and smaller group. The more you try to widen your audience base, the more problems that you're going to have. Unless you are financially strong enough by that time. There's no point in going to expand your reach.
I'm just going to take a quick point, Arun, from what Ram had mentioned a couple of minutes ago, which was staying lean, right? That digital media enables you to stay lean. And a point from what Vinod mentioned, which was scaling up. My question to all of y'all perhaps is, for an entrepreneur in this space, at what stage do you determine that you can scale up? And how do you approach those conversations, whether it's on investments, whether it's on advertising, or determining that you need to now do a subscription model? Everyone tends to start with the free read for everyone, and then you have these choices whether you become a subscriber and you have privy to exclusives and such. What is the thinking process for that, and how long after you start up do you go into that stage? Vinod, do you want to start us off with it?
Uh, sure. I can tell the other side of the story, Deepthi. Right. See, typically when we approach news source, right, newsroom, the first question we ask is what is the kind of focus you are looking at, right? So I have personally told a couple of small time, like they just want to begin something, and they used to come to us and tell, I want to begin on your platform. I outright tell them, see, this is going to be the cost. It's not about creating a platform for you and giving it to you, but what is it going to help you? How do you manage your revenues, assuming that I'll start today and then within 3 months we'll become a millions and billions in terms of page view, and I'll get that is the kind of imaginary business plan these people have. I have outright told them, don't get into this. First figure out where your audience is. See what is your scope for monetizing that. Are you talking about subscriptions in the near run, or are you talking about some kind of monetization? As simple as newsletters. You send newsletters and monetize your newsletter. That can be a good way to do this, right? But first, that should be very clear, right? Once that is there, the point which we typically go in is until things are already in place. Now I start having problems in terms of executing my vision, right? Where the existing oversource, where things are not able to work between 2 3 systems are not able to work to each other, they're not able to do handshakes between the systems. That is when me as a tech guy adds value there, right? I go take that and then try to get all these platforms to talk to each other and try to scale that for them, trying to bring transparency to what they're already doing. That is where we step in. And I think that should be the point where there needs to be a serious look at investing into tech. Till then it should be all about content, all about trying to go to your audience, trying to experiment with content and see what is going to fit, what's not going to fit. That's my point.
Fair enough, Vinod. Ram and Pratibha, what has your experience been in terms of exploring that option? I know, Ram, you've probably already had those conversations and you're well in your way, but Pratibha, given the fact that you're still in that process of starting up, when
That's
do you
right, a
think
long way to go.
when do you think that you might enter that conversation or that thought process, as Vinod was saying?
Well, I guess, I mean, I'm still in the stay lean stage where I want to minimize costs and I want to build my audience. And it's only when you start building your audience when you find clients. I think that's the point that I already mentioned. And once you know that you have a steady revenue coming in, once you're confident that you know your audience base is going to increase and you have the confidence of retaining that audience as well because you're confident about the content that you're delivering, I guess that is the stage when you realize that you need to invest more in the tech setup of yours and try and see if you can get into social media partnerships. I don't know how other digital platforms work, but then I guess this is how I would go into, because mine is a social media page and not a digital startup in the sense that it's not a news website. I guess Ram would throw more light on the website part of it. But then in terms of social media, I guess my scaling up would be in terms of investing more on the tech setup and then getting into partnerships with different social media platforms.
So I think it's a very subjective call as to what is the right time. It depends a lot about on the kind of platform that you are, the kind of content that you're doing, the kind of market that you're dealing with, the kind of business model that you have. But generally speaking, I would think that if you've started getting return business in a bit of a consistent manner, I think it's a good time for you to think about scaling up, right? First time anybody would throw you business. They could be sympathetic to you. They could just like you, and this is both true of advertising and a subscription revenue, right? There are lots of emotional reasons why a lot of media sales or subscription revenues happen. And we, in fact, play a lot on that as well. But I think when should you start scaling up is when people start returning to you, saying, hey, I liked what you did, and here, take more money and give me a little bit more of that. Generally speaking, I'm not saying that's like a golden rule or anything, but usually I would say that that's the time you would start thinking of scaling up. But I would say that even when you have scaled up, staying lean is a very, very important thing. Pratibha said that she's still in the stay lean phase.
I'll keep that in mind, Ram.
I'm saying that we are also still in the same need scale. I mean, we did balloon up a little bit in between, but and again, thanks to our CEO Vignesh, he keep reminding us that the Indian digital news market is not where, unless you have deep pockets, where you should be spending a lot of money right now. Given the kind of digital ecosystem that we live in and the kind of news ecosystem that we are in, political and financially speaking, I think staying lean is going to be something which is important for a long time to come.
Can I add one more? Can I just add one more to it?
Yes,
Yes, please,
absolutely.
Arun. Yes.
Under the given the situation that we have now, the political climate that we have, or political and media climate that we have, you will also have even if you want to scale up and you're looking at the revenue, additional revenue investment coming in, you will have to look at from the source from which the revenue is coming. That's also quite important right now, because that's where if you're let's take the News Minute for instance. News Minute, the News Minute, which recently I came and I saw a very nasty piece about the News Minute. Probably I don't know. So that it shows. So here, like it happens in the YouTube channels, or for that matter, when Mohammed Zubair was arrested, looking at the alt news source of revenue, where the contribution coming from, everything, just looking at trying to see whether there are, it's easiest for them to see whether there is a terror element in it, whether it's can be taken to terror. I'm sorry to take it in a in a in a political thing, but this is a genuine issue that while scaling up, you will definitely feel. I'll definitely feel it, especially if you have a startup like the News Minute with the way that they are now. Oh, but just digressing a bit. I'm happy that at least three alumni of the ACGA have turned media entrepreneurs. We have Danya Rajendran, then we have Joji Philip Thomas. I think Prem, you might remember Joji.
Oh,
Joji
yes, I
Philip
do.
Thomas was here. So he became one, and of course the one of the earliest one earlier one was Pari Parmeshwaran, who was the executive editor of Bloomberg. Then launched his own thing and sold that, and now he has become and a media investor. Okay, so anyway, so there are some
It's
investors
great that
around as well.
you create a full circle of an
Yeah,
ecosystem, a full circle of.
that's it. No,
I mean,
at least we know there are some people who are genuine investors and think, okay, right.
yeah.
Thank you.
So, Deepthi, you want to take the questions? I think we've got a lot of questions from viewers.
Yes, I think we have a mix of our viewers today joining us online, and we really thank you for being patient, listening to the conversation, and adding your questions. If you have a question that you've not yet put into the comments, I encourage you, please go ahead, put your questions in. I'm going to take a question from, and I hope I do not muddle up his name, Manika Vasagam Rangaswamy, who says after 40 years in the print media, he started a news portal and he's looking to you all for guidance on how to generate revenue. My additional question to Manikam's question is also this: how do you determine what value your work has as a price point? So, just throwing those two questions out. Anybody willing to take the question?
Let me take a dig on this, Deepthi. So typically, whenever a client comes to us, right? So initially we do run some numbers. Everything is publicly available. You can just go search in SimilarWeb. You just identify that website score in AdWords. Right? You can create an AdWord account on your own and just go run through a couple of reports on AdWords. Right? See what are the strong points or keywords they are ranking for, what kind of organic traffic they are getting, right? And then have a look at what kind of focus, multi-channel focus these people have, right? So you can pretty much you can use some heuristics and start running numbers in terms of what kind of audience they are going to target, and each of those audience group what kind of revenue programmatically it can give, right? So this is probably the first thing you'll have to do, right? And then essentially what you need to start looking at is where is your content source going to be. Like, see, I have a daily Tindi who's doing what daily Tindi or NDTV, they do around 1200 stories a day, right? This is actually all walks of life you can probably cover in this 1000 stories a day, right? This is the kind of stories. So definitely a person to start with, he is not going to do 1200 stories a day, right? They already are sitting on say 5 million 6 million kind of view page Facebook pages with so much reach, right? So you need to start looking at where your audience is and how are you going to reach them, through which channel, organic search, or is it social, or is it or so I even have a client who actually runs his entire show based on WhatsApp groups, subscriptions on WhatsApp groups, and he sends notifications to them through WhatsApp groups. This is a business model which is out there. So this is the first thing which you'll have to do: where your audience is, how do you segregate them, and then see what is the revenue potential of each of this audience set which you already are looking for. Once that is there, go ahead and start implementing. There are multiple things. See, as a digital entrepreneur, you need to understand the digital business in the first place. Have a thorough understanding of what SEO and how it's going to impact you. Have a thorough understanding of how social media is going to impact you and what is the kind of revenue it can generate for you. And have focus on some technicalities, basic technicalities, like how is that my website optimized, how is my channel optimized, those kind of things is a must for every digital entrepreneur. Right? Once these things are there, you basically experiment. At least experiment for six months, understanding what kind of content is working in each of the channels for your audience. Once that is there, again, you reach a point for a time at that point to scale. That is when you need help, external help, both in tech and kind of setting a process in place for scaling whatever revenue you already made. That's my short answer for that.
Thanks, Vinoth. So quickly, for the others, there are two questions that I'd like to club together. One is from Lourdraj Divyanathan. Okay, this is sort of very specific kind of question. I'm planning to start an app-based offbeat media platform, and my audience are Indian, he says within brackets, Nellai, diaspora, who have settled in various countries. Kindly advise, Ram, would you want to give business advice to someone? I mean, these are very specific questions. So in case you want to reach out to our panelists, their email IDs have been exposed here. So you can reach out.
For
Yeah,
a hyper local audience, I would think that you need to build captive audience. It's not enough if you have, say, 1,000, 2,000 million, 2 million followers who are from Tirunelveli on your Facebook page. I think start focusing on building captive audience, which is a newsletter email list, right? Or something a little bit more close, like a podcast. So I think and we are doing that. We are on that learning part of our journey here as well at the News Minute. Is that when you focus on such small, your focus is so sharp. So then your audience also needs to be sharp, and you need to be able to reach out to them in a very easy, direct manner, right? So social media and all that become your shoulder strategies. Your core strategies need to be you need to be based on platforms and based on ideas which give you direct access to your readers. So start building captive audience is what I would think. Second, again, I would think that have a very clear idea about your business model right from the beginning. Are you going to do advertising, or are you going to go subscription way? You can change it on the way. That's not an issue, but you need to somewhat choose one, at least to begin with, or at least have a very clear idea saying that, okay, maybe I'll do 50% this, 50% that. Not having thought about that at all and starting to do it is a bit of a bad idea, I would think, right? I've started telling a lot of people that it's better to say that I'm going to more than just what kind of content that you're doing. Along with that, start thinking about what kind of business model you would like to have. I think that's becoming more and more important now. So if you're going to say that you're focusing on Nellai diaspora, great, but subscription or advertising, you need to think about those things right away.
Thanks, Ram, for answering.
Yeah, Prem, thank you. And thanks, Ram. I just want to quickly just pivot to a different element of this discussion as well. Is like, as you're stepping into the digital entrepreneurial space, there's always this part where, the general public, if you may, has said that media takes sides right now. But actually, media does not take sides. We're supposed to be objective, we're supposed to be fair and balanced and right at the center. So when you're kind of building into this digital space, what is your advice to those individuals or companies or people that are looking at setting up shop in that space about taking a side or coming under pressure to take maybe a certain political side, if at all? And how do you stay at the center point? Because like we said, the digital media space is very easy to work in. It's a lean space. There's a lot more flexibility built into it. But then how do you stay true to what you're calling as, for example, an online news dissemination website is going to be? Arun, how do you teach your students that it's important to stay centered?
Sir, you're on mute.
I think that is one of the biggest problems that are facing right now. How are you going to hit the middle ground? You find that the kind of students that we have, the student mix that we have some students with no ideology, some left, some left liberal, some consider themselves right and right liberals. So you have the wide range of it, but how are you going to take the balance? That's the thing. So one of the things that I tell them is, at least for the time being, if you're going to launch a thing, keep your ideology to yourself. Okay, let's look at delivering news as it is, and not go for interpretation or too much at the time. If you want to be an interpretative one, then you will need to change your target audience. If you're looking at a particular wider target audience, you will need to keep your thing as far as possible. Don't be too commentative. Don't make too many comments, too many interpretations. Stick to news and be done with it. Okay, but that doesn't really always work. So you will need to be, you will have to a little bit of thing, but then you will have to be careful about what is the kind of audience that you are looking at. So you have to cater to that audience. If you're going to have if you're looking at something like a JNU audience, JNU type of audience, then you can't afford to have ABP type of content in that. Simple as that.
Thanks, Arun. And I think we could not stress that anymore with our new generation of journalists is to stay to the center point, no matter what the pressures might be. And I know that we've passed the hour in our conversation, and I would like to take the opportunity to help our panelists wind up. So I'm going to do this in a slightly different way, taking a page out of the film buffs that are on this group. So my question to all three of y'all, are you all ready? Is if you were a Rajnikant for your company, what would your punchline be? And this is for clickbait again. Everything for a digital media company. So, Pratiba, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm an ardent Rajnikant fan, so I'd like to start. So I guess my punchline would be "Ye vari, tani vari."
Good one, good one. Ram.
See, first of all, she took the easy one. Okay, and I don't know enough Rajnikant lines to answer your question.
No, it's okay. You don't need a Rajnikant line. You can come up with your own.
Punchline. Okay.
Any
Well,
punchline.
I would say it's stay lean. Staying lean.
Okay, awesome. And Arun?
Yeah.
Vinoth?
My thing will be really simple. It will be you matter. The reader, the consumer, you matter. That's it.
So for me, I would actually, looking from the other side, it should be a metrics driven thing. Whatever you do, have a metric and have quantifiable way of improving that.
Something like oru thadava sonna nooru thadava sonna madri.
Yeah, numbers.
So that's how digital media metrics actually work. So it should be the opposite of that. If you look at our decks and all, they'll be like, we'll say reach and we'll put 10 million. Nobody knows what that reach 10 million really means. You have to ask and find out. So it actually is like how that Rajnikant and works, but it shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
Well, evidently, our panelists are all huge fans of Rajnikant. I will not attempt to say anything in Tamil. I will just say that this was a very timely conversation, given the sort of environment we are in. And so I just want to say again, thank you so much, Pratiba, Ram, Arun, Vinoth, Prem, and Mrs. Srinivasan, for being able to join us on a Sunday afternoon when I know you have busy schedules in a weekend, to talk about a topic that would benefit many new journalists coming into the field, but also those of us that have been in the field and might be exploring an entrepreneurial dream living here in India. For those of you joining us online, I just want to say thank you again for tuning in. And if you are watching this sort of as a recast, I hope you watched to the end, because there are some amazing pieces of information that would aid your journey in this entrepreneurial path. And if you have more questions for our panelists, please feel free to send in your questions to the email address that's listed. But you can also find our panelists on LinkedIn and on social media, so give them a follow. It really does help build these conversations even offline. So overall, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, and have a wonderful Sunday evening.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for this. Thank you.
Thanks, Prem. Thanks, Dipti.